Hey, Steve Basic Architect from the Unbuild It podcast. Yeah, if you're in Providence on Friday, March 24th or Saturday, March 25th, guess what's happening? You guessed it, JLC Live. It's one of my favorite conferences, Providence, Rhode Island. And while you're there, don't forget to stop by the Huber booth. They're located in booth 239. They also have a happy hour on the afternoon of Friday, March 24th. So, yeah, you get to meet professional colleagues and have a beer on Huber. So while you're there, also be sure to check out Mike Slogat's Builders Workshop. Mike he's a longtime friend of the Unbuild It podcast and does a beautiful workshop. And Aaron Jones, Big Dog up in Canada, will be also presenting at JLC Live this year. And he joins a great group of presenters, including all of your favorite regular JLC attendees. So it's going to be another great show, especially that happy hour. So make sure you join us. Booth 239, JLC Live 23.
Pete Yost here for the Unbuild It podcast, and I'm here with my good buddy Steve Basic.
Hello, hello.
And Jake Bruton.
Hello.
I'm sorry to tell you this, but we have a really sad topic for coming right up. It's all about window weeps. And Jake introduced it as Don't Weep for Me, Argentina. We're going to let that just slide right by. So why are we talking about window weeps? Well, I've had two projects recently where the windows were in very exposed locations. They only leaked when there was
I think you should define what a window weep is for the accountants in our audience.
Okay. Fair enough. So window weeps are drainage systems, but that's a good point to make because my understanding is that the weeps are primarily to relieve the bottom of the insulated glazing unit. So we have a system between the rough opening and the window unit that we very carefully drain down, and that takes care of the load, the leaks that come between the window unit and the rest of the wall. And we have a system at the bottom of the sill that if the window construction leaks, but what's really important is that water that gets into between the frame and the IGU, that drains down to the bottom of the IGU, and the seals at the bottom of the insulated glazing units are incredibly sensitive to water sustained contact. So the weeps are the way that we relieve water that can damage the insulated glazing units.
So in other words, I have a weather stripping failure for the most part, and water gets into the frame of the window. The weep is how it gets out.
Yes, but we're not draining the window installation. We're draining the bottom of the IGU. And that's going to be important because these windows that leaked, they were in both cases high performance, one a double pane, one a triple pane. And we had units that were very, very similar, if not identical, and only the fixed panel units accumulated water and damaged the window, not the corresponding operable sash units, which was a real mystery until, after a lot of investigation, we discovered that in a fixed framed window, the weeps for the IGUs are through the bottom of the frame of the window. But if you have an operable sash, you have to drain the IGU in the sash. So they're in completely different locations. Well, I had never ever thought about, I knew the function of the weeps, which was to protect the bottom of the IGU, but I hadn't thought through how they actually work and how they change from one window type to the next, or how they might change. And then I also assumed that, well, why do I need to be responsible for this? The weeps are something the manufacturers do. So
and
it's not really
what they're doing.
And sure, they must know how to do a weep system. So you guys know this, but brand new topic. I knew nothing about it, and I started to try to collect information off the internet. I have a good friend within the window research industry, I guess, and come to find out, there's not a lot of standardization about weep systems from manufacturer to manufacturer. In fact, I can't even find any requirements for weeps. And this culminated in us, it was coincidental with going up to the International Builders Show and visiting about a dozen window manufacturer booths. And pretty much I got a different explanation of whether or not they had window weeps, how they worked, and where they were located 12 different times at the International Builders Show. And I just want to thank Jake. I did a recent presentation on this topic, and he very kindly gave me his photo of a window installed in a wall system where the weeps were on the right-hand margin of the window because the person had taken a slider and installed it to be
90 degrees
from where it should have been. That was incredibly entertaining.
I'm glad you liked that. I was walking past it and I was like, ooh, I need to stop.
Well, and I think the story behind that is that at trade shows, there has to be a union person who actually does the installation. So, we
it's not a carpenter
fault
that
them.
put that in.
Although there should have been some adult supervision somewhere.
We don't bring a slider to be installed in that situation in the first place.
Note to self. So part of the reason we're doing this topic is because I think there's an awful lot to learn. And I think we're going to learn it from people that listen to the podcast, or I hope, their experience with window weep systems, whether they've ever had a conversation with the manufacturer about, it's the responsibility of the manufacturer to install the weeps, but who protects their locations? So I'm really curious, first of all, to hear what you guys have as experience for window weep systems.
I want to talk about,
Go ahead.
let's just say, we know what they look like in the Schucos, the Living 80 series. They drain through the face on a fixed panel and on a sash, but the sash doesn't drain. The sash drains into the frame vertically on weeps that are hidden, and then they have weeps out the front the same as the fixed panel.
So that brings up an interesting, because we can have the weeps drain to the face of the window unit, or they can drain to the bottom, be concealed and drain to the bottom of the
And
window
so what
unit.
are the consequences of different choices there?
Great. So I suspect a lot of window manufacturers prefer to drain them concealed because then they don't have little cutouts in the front of the window frame. But I think the penalty there may be that if an installer is not aware that there are weeps that are concealed, they go ahead and just butter them up and they're closed. Or they clog over time.
So every installation manual that I've read for American manufactured flanged windows in the last, let's call it 6 or 7 years, they all say you have to leave the bottom flange open so that anything that gets in there that drains out. So if the manufacturer is then pointing the weeps downward into the frame, in theory, they've protected themselves and said, well, it's gonna run out if it gets to there. The challenge with doing it that way is we don't know where it is. We would have to inspect the window to find where it is.
Right.
The other option in the face, if it's being installed in a way like, say, the windows at my personal house, they're taped. Well, they don't have a flange, they're taped. The tape could get over top of the flange. The applied trim on the outside could get over not the flange, the weep. I've seen quite a few vinyl window manufacturers that put a little wind damper flappy thing that will let things out. We have to worry about them getting clogged if they're on the face, probably more than if they're pointing down. Do you have a preference?
Well, Steve, before I jump back in, do you have comments or perspective on window weep systems? You do.
Please join us.
So, I think it's a bowl of fruit.
Ooh.
You like this, huh?
I do.
So, we're talking...
Peter's favorite thing is analogies. Don't...
So, we're talking apples, oranges, and pears here.
Okay.
Right? Because I think because I was slightly confused when you opened it up and said they're to drain the IGU. I think they're only meant to drain the IGU if it's a solid wood frame window, because the only cavity in the whole assembly is where the IGU gets inserted into the wood frame. There's nothing else in there to drain. Now, hear me out though. If we're talking European windows, the UPVC and aluminum, those are chambered frames. So there's multi-chambers. Water that gets in there needs to get out. So that's different than, say, a macro-in window. That's a wood frame window. And then aluminum clad wood frame windows have to drain like a rain screen. So I think the first issue is what kind of window, and like you guys already said, where are the weeps located and what are they trying to do? Because I think they're trying to do different things based on different window assembly types. Right. So try to understand that. I do know I've used numerous different European manufacturers, and the weeps are not consistently in the same place. Like if you're Schuco, I know where they're going to be. Aluprof, I know where they're going to be. But we used the Calwall ones, and they were significantly lower.
What brand?
The Calwall. They're out of Ireland.
Okay.
Clearwall?
Or Clearwall. Clearwall. No, not Calwall. Sorry. Clearwall.
There was an accent in there, so he didn't know what it was called.
Well, in Ireland, we call them Clearwall.
Good one.
But,
Garbage.
Clearwall.
I don't know what I was saying. But they're significantly lower. So in a Schuco, you typically will put the windowsill below it. They drain out onto the windowsill and just bleed off and run off the windowsill. But in the Clearwall, they are significantly lower. So we had to bring the windowsill up and allow drainage below into our rain screen system to bleed those out.
So a couple of points that you raise, I think, are one, there's no sort of single system. It's pretty left to the manufacturer, the type of frame, the type of assembly.
What the manufacturer thinks that it's doing.
Right. I didn't get solid understanding when I went to each of the booths about, is it to protect the bottom of the IGU? Because if the sash is operable...
Are you asking me to be surprised that a U.S. manufacturer's rep doesn't understand their product?
Or that they disagree with somebody that makes virtually the same product at a different company?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it kind of led you right into that one.
I'm not going to be surprised on that one. I have a lot of friends that are reps, and I love having conversations with them, but I will be the first one to say that a lot of them don't even know how to sell their own products.
Well, be that as it may, I think we have a potential sort of industry-wide problem because I don't think that all of us are taking into account the different locations of the weeps, the different systems. In part of my research, I found one paper that said, this weep system moves from the inside of the window to the outside to take care of interior wintertime condensation. So not only draining the window frame, but also a channel that goes from outside to inside to take care of condensation coming down the inside of the glazed unit.
That sounds like a bad solution to a bad problem that you created.
Sounds like we're introducing cold outdoor air to the inside face of the window when it's cold out.
So a couple things come up, which is if you have these channels and they're freely moving water, don't they also move air? And therefore you get some sort of energy penalty for doing a really good job of doing the weep system? Or are there little flaps that, allow water that builds up enough tiny head to then drain out,
and then they get gummed up and dammed up.
So
and don't work.
So that brings up another issue, which is what sort of responsibility is there for maintenance of the weeps because they're going to get clogged.
Can we back up for a second? Because I'm really interested in how did the Mr. Peter Yost identify a problem that took him down the weep hole?
Well, as I said, I had two projects where we were not doing a very good job of figuring out where the water was coming from, particularly when it was a fixed unit.
So you installed the window, there was a puddle or something?
I didn't install the windows. In both these projects, which are in very exposed climates in the Northeast, when it rained really hard and the wind was blowing, only the fixed panel units had water accumulation within the window system.
But how did you identify the problem? I guess is my point. How did you know? Hey,
there was visible water
on the inside windowsill.
They were. It was pooling in the window enough that you could tell there was that water was not draining from the window.
Like this should be going somewhere,
exactly,
not staying here.
Yeah. So we weren't exactly sure where it was coming in, and we weren't exactly sure why it wasn't draining out. So a couple of things from this. With the one situation, the weeps were closed off over time by people who came along and thought, oh, the bottom of this window is not caulked. Let's seal it off. So that's another
Let's pause
issue.
there for a second. And Steve's favorite, when you get out a tube of caulking, not what are you keeping out, what are you keeping in?
What are you sealing in? Exactly. They didn't understand where
You should have to have training to buy sealant.
Sasco training. Sorry, I just had to throw it.
You really can't yell like that. People are going to be mad at you.
That's okay. It wakes them up while they're driving. They can see them swerving on the highway now.
So I think the other thing is that if we make deeper walls, now we can move windows deeper into the assembly. And that means that if those weeps are concealed and they're, now pretty deep in the window, are you accommodating the location of that weep as you move the window back and forth in the opening?
Yeah, it's interesting. Innies are inversely proportional in durability from head to sill. Like the more I move it in, the more protected my head gets, but the sill becomes more unprotected. More of a liability?
Yeah. How does the sill become?
Because you're exposing more of the wall beneath it, right? If I have a double wall structure and I put the window as an outie, the head becomes very vulnerable.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
But the sill is not vulnerable because everything drains right out the wall.
So you're talking about the whole sill assembly, not just the
right. Yeah. But the minute I pull the window in as an innie, the head has become very protected because things will drip, but they drip down on the sill, which exposes my wall below.
So the other thing that was a little troubling was I had two window manufacturers say, well, we don't need weeps in our system. We just keep the water out.
So it's a perfect system.
It's a perfect exclusionary system. Correct.
I wonder what the actual percentage of windows that come off that manufacturer's line are actually perfect after a year.
Well, the other thing too is I think that it's quite possible that some of their windows rely upon, a perfect barrier and no weeps, but I bet you they have other systems or other types of windows where there actually may be a weep system.
I mean, aside from European windows, I've seen weeps on a couple vinyl manufacturers, but some of the major manufacturers, I don't know if I've ever really looked for a weep on their windows, the double hungs or casements.
Well, and that's a bit of a testament that I think
they're not easily identified. I'll tell you that. They don't jump out at you. The Schuko ones jump out at you because you got to put a cap on it.
Right.
It's a little slit that you get a bag of caps. So it's like, what are these caps?
I can pull the bag of caps out of one of the drawers in the office if you want to see what they look like.
Yeah.
I never installed them.
Well, so the other thing is that there is the article that was talking about wintertime condensation and having a channel for that said, in the U.S. there's a requirement for weep systems. And so I went and read the actual language in the fenestration standard. And it doesn't say that you have to have weeps. It says that you have to have detailed reports on your weep systems.
I wonder if the author of that report sat there and said, someday one person's going to read this. Mr. Peter Yost.
I wonder how many decades it is before somebody else reads this.
Well, so
did you read the whole thing? Was there any hidden?
I could not find anywhere where it explicitly stated you have to have weep systems in your windows. What it said was you have to have detailed reports on your drainage systems. It didn't say that you had to have the systems. It said you had to have reports. So it could be that if you have them, you have to report on them, but you don't have to have them.
But I could just say, hey, I build a real good barrier system here. End of report.
Well, these were test reports on your, drainage efficiency. But I have talked to a couple of people in the window industry, and they have said, it's a bit of the Wild West. There's nothing that is standardized, and there's a lot of different ways to accomplish the weep system. So one of my aha moments with all this was, if we're going to space our claddings off of our WRBs to get free drainage, and they see easily a tenth to a hundredth of the amount of water that a window could see, we definitely need to create a free draining path between the rough sill and the bottom of the window unit. We should pull it up off so that water can drain out.
Okay, so for clarity, when you say free draining path, is that space insulated?
That's 3 words too, by the way.
No. So that's a great question, Jake, because now what we have is a bit of a battle going on between, well, wait a minute. If I create that free draining space and I allow air to circulate back there, aren't I bypassing thermally the wood frame, or the frame of the window? And then you better be damn sure you get a nice air seal at the back dam, because that's your only line of defense for air leakage at the base of the window. So it kind of comes down to what's more important, free draining that sill, which is the structural bottom of the window that's sitting in constant contact with the rough sill. That, to me, that's a really bad idea. And if there are weeps, make sure you put the supports, the shims in, so that you're not blocking off
that downward.
Yeah.
Weep.
And I found Viricon is a large North American IGU manufacturer, and they specifically say, hey, the setting blocks have to be underneath, pull the window up, they're structurally supporting it, but they allow free drainage at the bottom of the IGU. But they're an IGU manufacturer. They're not making windows. So we have this process of IGU manufacturer, window manufacturer, installation details, and then maintenance. And all 4 of those, there's no standardization that I could find.
Can I tell you a secret, Steve?
What?
Until he
Do I have to put my hands over my
until he
ears?
brought this up a couple weeks before IBS, I had never considered the weeps or the weep locations. To
I have
consider
only
myself,
because I've had to detail the sill to make sure that I'm either above or below the hole in the Schuko windows. But honestly, I don't think I've ever searched for it on other.
I mean, yeah,
windows.
fair. When we install windows, I look and we go, yeah, we can't. The frame, this much of the frame has to be exposed. But I never considered, how it was going to affect.
Well, that's why
my
we have
installation
Pete, because I
process.
think Pete makes us think about things we don't ever want to think about.
Well,
he's doing the Lord's work behind the scenes, is what he's doing.
well, and
He did live in a parsonage. I'm bringing that back.
Callback, throwback.
the parsonage was full of weeps all over the place. So I
That was
stumbled
a very
on this
sad
topic.
display of a joke.
Yeah, you can count on me for that, Steve. So I stumbled on the topic. I have to admit, I've spent a lot of time thinking about windows and how they work, but it never occurred to me to think about weep systems, even though I knew from folks at Lawrence back in.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say you've probably spent more time thinking about weeps than any major window manufacturer in the U.S.
Well,
so far.
This is sort of like the wingnut stuff. I would love for somebody to call and say, that dumbhead, the buckethead, we've got all kinds of research on this. We've got all kinds of systems. We've got requirements. So I'm hoping that maybe I've stirred a hornet's
I love it
nest.
when you do censored cursing. You're so
I was struggling. I was really
buckethead. You buckethead, you.
We try to keep it fairly clean on this podcast, but hearing him stumble for an insult that didn't have
I can't wait to see if you have a resource on this.
Oh,
It's really funny you should say that, Steve, because at the beginning of this episode, I thought, what the hell am I going to say for resources?
You buckethead.
There aren't any. So I think here's my resource. We are going to count on anybody who's involved in the building industry, whether you're a window manufacturer, an IG manufacturer, a carpenter, a builder, or an architect. I want to know what you know about weeps and weep systems.
So you're in search of a resource.
I am definitely in search of a resource, but we will report back to the building community about
somebody
this.
that's retired, he is very motivated. I'm really proud of him.
Hey, are you ready for my section?
I'm
Wait,
absolutely.
no, not yet.
Okay.
I want to pry and say to both of you, like, knowing what we know, which I think now that we've listened to Pete, we're fairly well informed as to
Oh, I feel like I'm
how much we don't know.
yeah.
I'm an associative weep expert.
Do you initially lean towards a specific weep location, and why? And does it change from material to material?
If it's a flangeless window, I probably would say below, because then I don't have to see it. I can get rid of it real easy.
Can't tape the face at the bottom then.
If it's a
you've got to know they're there, and you got to keep them open.
Yeah. If it's a flanged window, then obviously on the face, or you would think in today's day and age, like you could have some kind of slit along the front leading edge of a flanged window where the flange kind of tucks up maybe like 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch behind the face of the frame. I mean, it's tucked back like 1.25 inches anyway on most windows. So somewhere in that 1.25 inches, you would think that they'd be able to drain the system out.
So I'm going to do a terrible pun. There is a tear trickling down my cheek on this topic about weeps, because you know what you're doing?
What?
You're trying to redesign the window, right? So maybe what we have...
Coming up with a solution that doesn't already exist yet.
Exactly.
Should I be afraid that Pete's getting sensitive on me?
No, this is really cool that you're a designer.
Ooh.
And so you're thinking about not how we could make sure existing systems work, but maybe we can develop better systems. I'm convinced that a lot of window manufacturers say, oh, this is easy. We just buy a window punch and we make that done. So it's a very simple solution because it's not one that has had a lot of attention.
And from that perspective, I'm going to take the builder's perspective and say, I think that I would rather have it in the face. I know it's not the aesthetic choice. I would rather just have it in the face where you could see it, where you can service it, where you could clean it, where you could visually inspect it. I would rather it just be like in the Schucos that are at my personal house. I think I'd rather just have it in the face.
And not put the cover on it. And just
not put the cover on it at all.
Just slit.
Yeah, see, to me, they look like punched out pieces of metal. They're not.
That's because they are.
I know, but they're just not finished looking. So you got this beautiful bottom of the window, and there's punch outs in it. It's a little tacky to me.
I'll be critical here. There were 2 reasons that we didn't put them in. One of them is that the color doesn't match.
So they really stand out.
Yeah. So then they look like it's just ever so slightly darker.
But your white windows. They're not white.
They're white on the inside. They're anthracite on the outside.
Oh, 7/16.
And so he's right on the color number 2. What a dork. At what point?
It's nice to see him be the dork.
I don't know which one is worse, the window weep rabbit hole that you've gone down, or the fact that he's memorizing European raw color numbers at this point. This is the reason why neither one of you know your children's birthdays. Steve's thinking.
I know Lexi's for sure. I know Nicole. Nicole's is easy because she was almost an April Fool's baby, so she's April 2nd. Lexi's is July 24th. Steve's is the one I was getting wrong.
Making these up.
No, I'm not. You can check on those.
I'm going to tell you that I will not discuss. I will not discuss my family's birthdays because I use it in a lot of my security codes.
That's great. Well, I will tell you the one time I was going through
dead uncle's birthdays.
I was going through customs with my kids without my wife, and the lady at customs said, "And what are their birthdays?" And I went, crap.
Time to get embarrassed.
I was like, I can show you pictures.
Hold on. Let me ask my 7-year-old what her birthday is.
I was like, I can show you pictures of them being born on my cell phone. I'm having a really hard, since then. I
saw those pictures.
I've put,
so you need to look at the timestamp on the.
I put effort into it, and I realized that was like a failure as me as a father, not even knowing what my kids' birthdays were. Now I know what they are, and for the same reason. Well, I don't want people getting into my cell phone.
People say, "Oh, you have kids?" Yeah, I got 3 of them. Oh, how old are they? And I'm like, "Oh,
I don't know. They're like this tall."
You just rattle off numbers real quick.
It changes all the time. They have birthdays and shit.
It changes. Makes you look like a pro.
Not to return to the topic at hand, maybe to wrap up, but so what are we looking for? I think the industry needs to have a better understanding about what weeps are, what their function is, and we're a community. We can learn a lot more if people share their perspectives. I gotta believe that somewhere out there's a weep expert, somebody that's even more of a nerd than one of us.
Out there. Isn't that like a Disney song? Somewhere out there.
And I want to sort of end this with a confession. This is probably now 35 years ago, but I replaced a picture window in a bay window. It was a big sucker. And she said,
big hole at the bottom. He taped it up. Like,
no, I had the window, I had the IGU manufactured, and then I built the wood frame for it, and I stuck it in that opening. And I think back and I thought that thing probably fogged up in a year. And the client didn't have enough sense to call me and say, hey, is it your fault that this window fogged up? Because I did not protect the bottom of that window at all. Didn't protect the bottom of the IGU. And I didn't ask anybody about how to do it. I just thought, oh, you just build a wooden frame around it.
Put some caulk on it.
As long as you pin the frame to the glass, what the hell's the rest of it?
I must say, now you have an army of people that are now weep conscious.
Yeah.
Weep conscious.
Number one, Pete asked for information. He's looking for guidance. He's looking to clarify everything. Number two, I think Pete also wants unsolicited weep pics, although that makes them solicited.
Sure, yeah,
you should flood it. What's your email?
I think on this one, if you're okay with it, I would give your email.
Sure,
because this is probably okay. Well, I'm going to let you give it because I don't know what it is.
Okay.
It's Ray at Quick.
I just type PE and it pops up and I say, okay.
It's autofill.
Yeah.
It's Peter, Peter, at building-right.com. And right is with a W, WRIGHT.
So it's not
like brothers.
Like the Wright brothers, yeah.
Hey, have either of you guys seen the movie Constipation?
Nope.
Yeah, me neither. It hasn't come out yet.
So you are in charge of our joke department. This is a side of you I've rarely seen, Steve.
Oh, that was a good one.
It was pretty good.
It hasn't come out yet. Okay. For those of you not watching and just listening, I'm rubbing my temples and trying to figure out how I got into this situation.
If call it luck.
Here's the deal, too. I will make sure that if I find a decent resource, it's definitely going to be on our website.
Okay. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. If you're not, subscribe on YouTube anyway. Leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. That 5-star review is algorithmically the way that other people find us rather than just the word of mouth, although word of mouth is great too. We want to say thank you for joining us. We want to say thank you for listening. We do this because we have people that listen and because we know that Pete can ask for help when he's stumped on something on this platform.
Hear, hear.
So we trust your knowledge. Give us a hand here. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Goodbye.